What is the United States Constitution? I'll tell you what it's not. The United States Constitution is not a dinosaur relic to be dismissed with time. It's the sole protection for all free citizens of this country to arm and defend themselves from any individual, group, or regime that would infringe upon the rights and liberties stated within it. The Constitution is a proposed, devised, and joint implemented means of assurance for the constituents of this country to remain orderly, productive, and free citizens of the United States. The Constitution was duly agreed upon as the primary and secondary defense for all natural and generative citizens of America to protect themselves from any opposition against free liberties outlined within its documented pages. The rights and liberties this document affords were put into motion by the founders of this country with the expressed intent that the collection of communities at their present time of its institution would undoubtedly grow to a greater nation of number and strength. The overall precedent of the leaders who forged the U.S. Constitution sets forth three main outlines they deemed a necessary impedance into its current society of people, set forth as a guideline of prosperity for any society with plans of becoming a nation of people in peaceful coexistence with one another. Of these guidelines set forth by the founders of this country, the first of which is order. Order is not only necessary to maintain peace among our nation of people in coexistence, it's welcomed by them, but in respect to the Constitution of our country, with all liberties afforded by it still intact. If you have an individual or group who decides upon themselves to disregard the legislation and practices of the Constitution, well, this in itself will create disorder among those who value their oath to uphold its meaning, and for good reason. The founding fathers of this country had an expressed focal point that for order to be created and maintained, it needed to be supported on two separate fronts of existence. The first and most important is that citizens of this country need to always know and have present for themselves the ability to be able to protect themselves from all and any situations or people who wish to take from them by force or otherwise their individual abilities to engineer, create, procreate, exist, and make families, or implement free and independent exchange of any of their own created or engineered works. While the understanding of these freedoms of prosperity may seem coherent and common, those liberties and the induced need of the ability to protect them must always be available and supported at all costs by the citizens themselves as their responsibility and duty to remaining productive, free citizens while among any society within the United States. Furthermore, the founders of this country set forth that in order to relieve the constant burden on each citizen alone to be vigilant of their individual liberties afforded to them, that an expressed need for additional support in the form of a constant protector of their constitutional rights should be afforded to all citizens of the U.S. This was to be done in the form of officials elected by the citizens themselves of each state independently to ensure that the interests of the majority from every state be met under agreements of the United States Constitution with full concern of the issues of the citizens aggrieved. Now, the founders of this country knew that with these two expressed forms of separate assurances of the liberties afforded to each individual in place as a guiding foundation for laws that may be needed in the future, that as long as these liberties expressed in the Constitution be followed at all times when making laws or enforcing individual liberties, no unnecessary conflicts or unjust practices could be set into motion over the populace of the United States. They also expressed that if conflict does arise and the interests of the liberties afforded to the people be the concern, in order to stop impedance or imposure on the constitutional rights afforded to any individual, group, or nation, all measures necessary be taken by any free citizen, group, or institution of this country to ensure the liberties of the Constitution over its citizens be afforded in the future. This is not only your right, but each individual citizen of this country's duty to protect the Constitution and its liberties afforded to its people at all costs. Furthermore, those that fail to do so also are failing their agreed oath to their pledge to the foundation of this country. The founders of our country made sure to further enforce the impression of the individual need to ensure security from oppressive constituents by making clear the importance of the capacity of free citizens' ability to defend themselves and the constitutional liberties which enable them not just to bear arms in all states, but also to have ready their own militia of citizens armed to equal measure of the elected protectors of the U.S. Constitution to ensure no unfair impedance on individual liberties is suffered by its citizens at the hands of its electorates official charged with the protection of their individual liberties afforded by the Constitution. The second precedent, conclusive focal point for liberties outlined under the Constitution and awarded to the citizens of the United States of America, is productivity. As both individuals, free and independent, which will encourage the overall goal of productivity as a nation. And finally, the third outlined express precedent the forefathers of this country set forth to promote strength and stability as a nation of free and independent individuals was in itself the very essence of what they meant when they created the constitutional term free citizen. These are the three main precedents, which are the focal backbone on which the United States Constitution was not only founded upon, but in times necessary, enforced throughout the nation of America, that whosoever threaten the liberties of any free citizen under the protection of the United States Constitution is by all accounts declaring themselves enemies of the citizens of America. The very purpose of the United States Constitution, in company with the Bill of Rights, is the core of protection for the United States of America and its citizens. Who would want to usurp the foundations of the liberties afforded by the U.S. Constitution if they don't ultimately plan to destroy its people or forcibly occupy its territory? Is not in itself an act of war against a nation's people, in turn, an act of war against that nation? Then by all measures necessary, is it not your duty to win the war against your nation? What good is an oath to a notion no one is willing to fight to uphold when threatened. Or for those who have fought and died for such a notion, and purposes for their sacrifices while fighting are forgotten by the generations who followed. Man, you know who this is. You know what I'm talking about. But if you don't know who this is, man, my initials are FBJ3, man. And what I'm talking about is, if you've been asleep and just don't know, man, the United States and regimes currently behind the mobility of our government is focused on disarming the United States citizens from the liberties of the Constitution. Their goal is to void the constitutional rights of all U.S. citizens altogether, so that they can take control and occupy this country by force with little resistance, little to no resistance. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an act of war by all accounts, by all measures. And if you can't see this, there is nothing that I can say to you that will have you understand, because obviously your mental faculties just aren't in a line with being able to understand that if your constitutional rights are attacked and taken from you, then your very right to be free is void. And by all measures, you become a slave to whoever is controlling the United States. And whatever they want from you is what they're going to get.